besides being here for a wonderful meal, we are here to honor the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and of course the 25th anniversary of the Neil Squire Society being a charitable society. But we actually started 3 years before that with the grassroots days. Now, we're making the quarter of a century mark. My hardest congratulations go out to any number of people here, all of the staff. But I'll start with Gary, the CEO, and you have been with us since the very early days, and but he took over as CEO from Bill in 1992. Bill passed away in early 1993. But I also want to honor all the past and present boards of directors, employees, loyal supporters, volunteers, and thousands of clients. That's the biggest part of it all. So, and do not forget, well, I was just going to mention that this is really a national society, because we are not only working hard in Vancouver, but also in Ottawa, Regina, and Fredericton, New Brunswick. I guess now that let's pass it over to Nancy.
Yes.
Okay.
So thanks, Peggy. I'm just going to speak. I'm going to say a few words about my father, Bill, for those who knew him and for those who didn't know him. Bill was a visionary. Those of us who knew him well would all attest to that. I also suspect that all of us who knew him well would admit that we were never quite certain where those visions would lead. As a child, I remember when the annual review of patents granted in the preceding year was published. I remember this because Bill would sit at the dinner table turning the pages, making comments like, "Oh well," or "Oh, I didn't stop thinking about that one," as he flipped through and saw that someone else had applied for a patent on one of the many ideas spinning around in his head. What I didn't realize was that each of these patents probably reflected the single vision of someone else, but Bill's visions were multi-dimensional and so numerous that it was impossible for him to actualize all of them into the world. His design work was modern. I can recall being at the Seattle World's Fair in 1962, and it was as though every hour we came across something Bill had designed. Salt and pepper shakers in the sugar container on the restaurant table, the unique door handle as we opened the pavilion, a particular motor that someone had used to animate a piece of artwork. His designs were also exciting and often on the leading edge of technology. He designed the dual taper ski pole that Nancy Green used when she won the Olympic gold medal. He designed the skis that Yuichiro Mihiru used when he skied down Mount Everest. Like most visionaries, he wasn't always successful. For instance, there was the time he decided in the early 1970s to enter the World Championship hang gliding competition in Big White. Hang gliding was a fairly new sport at the time. It, of course, grabbed Bill's attention. I'm not sure if it was ignorance, bravado, or a combination of these that encouraged Bill to build his own hang glider and, with my brother Bob, enter the competition. When they arrived, we were all a bit shocked to discover that the other competitors all had sleek, professionally manufactured hang gliders. Of course, that didn't keep Bill from entering the competition. Here's Bill's description of that flight. So these are his words in a little story he wrote about this. We, meaning he and Bob, carefully measured our location point for the body harness. If it was too far back, we'd climb into a stall that would kill the flight, and maybe all those along with it. If it was too far forward, we'd descend too fast and auger into the landing area at 1,000 miles an hour. Although my calculations for the correct mounting point were naturally correct, I carefully observed where the leading competition had their mounting points, and after much sweating and deliberation, I decided to move our mounting point back 1.5 inches. We were now 5th in line. 15 had soared off and made beautiful landings 1,000 feet below. I assured Bob that our last adjustment was correct, and just to be sure, I'd go first and he could fly after I had circled the mountain, waved to all the thousands looking on, and landed smack on target. We were now at the starting gate. I hooked on the harness, grabbed the control bar, aimed my skis down the mountain, and with Bob helping to support the kite, I took off. I was in the air. The snow-covered ground was 3 feet away, 6 feet away, 20 feet. I was going up, up, up. I could see hundreds of trees below me, all the way down to the crowds at the target in the valley. I should be going down, but I was going up. I was going to stall. I struggled to get the nose down, to fly, to soar, to be free, but the control bar was back, tight against my stomach. We were still going up. Damn my fat stomach. The kite veered off to the right, severely banked, and smashed into the middle of a huge cedar tree. With a forward momentum stop, we went down, twisting around so I ended up on top of the glider, landing like a fallen hero in 10 feet of snow. All this had taken about 5 seconds. There was deadly silence. Wham! All the snow on the evergreen boughs had been jarred loose and came tumbling down, landing on the kite and me, burying us under about 3 feet of snow. I lay there, dead still, confident I was alive, and gave vent to my feelings, chanting an old mantra I had picked up in the Orient. Oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck. I heard Bob yelling, "Dad, are you okay? Dad, Dad!" And I realized he was digging for me with a ski. He heard my mantra, and he knew I was okay. Bill Squire ignited Bill's passion. With his passion ignited, Bill became supercharged. All of his determination, tenacity, and just plain stubbornness rose up to power his vision. As those of you who knew him would attest, there were times when he needed to rely on his Oriental mantra. Yet he never gave up. Before Bill's death, he had an opportunity to begin building a sturdy foundation for the Neil Squire Society. From those first early days of volunteer labor, co-op students, and tiny grants strung together, Bill learned how important it was to have a strong base for the society and a strong physical base. Interestingly enough, this had been less of a concern in his personal life, where he sometimes had a laissez-faire attitude towards finances. Yet he had an overarching concern that the Neil Squire Society had enough money to continue delivering innovative services to the disabled. He spoke about having enough money to own a building or enough core money to create an income stream to support the society. His vision didn't foresee the days of 2% interest. He wanted to be able to provide bursaries for educational support for disabled students. So when Bill died, much too early for the rest of us, his visionary fund was created. Dozens of people have contributed to this fund, and it now has $20,000 in it. Could even Bill have dreamed that the Neil Squire Society would be celebrating its 25th anniversary? Perhaps. At the time of Bill's death in the spring of 1993, white camellias were just beginning to bloom. We had a small potted camellia covered with white blossoms at his celebration of life. A year or two later, I transplanted this camellia into my front garden. It is now taller than I am. Every year on the anniversary of Bill's death, the fragile blooms open. The size of the camellia bush reminds me of how time moves on and how things change, even though we might not notice it in the moment. But each year, as March begins and the fat green buds slowly push open, I am reminded of something so much bigger than each of us. As the March days warm slightly, I watch closely for that first bud to slowly open, and for the first glimpse of the white blossom within. And then, first one by one, and then dozen by dozen, the perfect white blooms burst open. It is akin to the soaring Bill felt momentarily on the hang glider, and I like to think it is how his vision would soar in that magnificent creative way that was so unique to Bill.